It is time for another edition of the Sports Wrap with Michael Kravetz. I am your host, Michael Kravetz, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about the Steelers' last-second win against the Philadelphia Eagles, the horrible Pitt loss to Syracuse, the Pirates' finish to the 2012 season, and give you a little update on the NHL lockout. So, I guess to start off the show, of course, had to start off with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Went into the game yesterday, the Battle of Pennsylvania, 1-2, desperately needing a win at home to stay afloat, or I guess you could say in the mix for the AFC North Division crown, even though it's this early. Baltimore beat Kansas City. They're now 4-1, so Steelers had to win this game to at least stay within shouting distance. And they were able to get the win on Sean Sweezum's 34-yard field goal as time expired. They beat the Eagles 16-14. This game, by no means, was very pretty at all. It was an ugly game. The weather was dreary, so kind of fitting for this type of game. It was a defensive struggle for the least part. With Roethlisberger, you didn't see the type of efficiency that he had in the first three games. Passed for 207 yards, no touchdowns, although the one, he threw a pass to Mendenhall, and it was a 13-yard touchdown, but it was technically a lateral, so therefore it was a running touchdown credited to Mendenhall. So I know a lot of fantasy owners were a little unhappy to see that, especially me, because Ben is my starting quarterback, but it's all good. So, Ben, though, he played a good game. He did not get sacked at all for the first time in 2 years. So I applaud the offensive line. They did a hell of a job because the Eagles, they have a good front four. Their defense is built around their front four. So I thought the O-line did a really good job. The one exception to the O-line, though, in this game was Willie Colon. He once again did not look sharp at his guard position. He had 4 holding penalties called on him. One of them was nullified, but you can't do that on a consistent basis, which it seems it's happening to him a lot. He's probably the one offensive lineman who's having the most trouble with these penalties. And obviously, if I'm Mike Tomlin, Sean Kugler, I would consider maybe moving Cologne to a tackle spot, which is what he played for when he first came up with the Steelers. And I know you have Starks and Gill there, but once DeCastro comes back, he'll be filling in the other guard position. And if Cologne's not getting the job done, then I would say you should move Gilbert back to guard, and then just insert Adams on the right side with Starks on the left, because if Cologne keeps playing the way he does, it's going to cost them some. It might cost them some games, because one of those holding penalties was costly in one of the drives for the Steelers, and they were only able to get a field goal on that drive. So it may come back to bite them in the foot sometime. The offense looked I wouldn't say as sharp, of course, as the other games. They only put up 16 points. They only had 1 touchdown. 3 field goals by Sean Sweezum. He's perfect on the year so far, 8 for 8. So that's a good sign. I think only 4 kickers are perfect right now, so it's good that he's one of them. Once again, though, Ben spread the ball around. Brown led the pack with 7 receptions for 86 yards. Miller had 4 catches once again. Sanders had some big catches. Wallace was primarily shut down because Nnamdi Azumawe was covering him most of the game, and he only had 2 catches for 17 yards. So, obviously, the big deep threat wasn't there. I didn't expect them to have any big plays in this game because they have 2 of the best corners in the game with Azumawe and Rogers Cromartie. So, I didn't expect to see those deep bombs that you saw with Wallace and even some of the long passing plays that Ben has connected on with Brown early this year. I must say, though, I am glad Rashard Mendenhall is back, because the Steelers' running game looked completely lifeless the first 3 weeks. And Mendenhall comes back, 14 carries, 81 yards. He had a 17-yard run, which has been the longest so far for a Steeler running back this year. That's 5.8 yards per carry. As a team overall, they rushed for 136 yards, by far the most out of these 4 games. And it's just a welcoming sight to see this because Mendenhall looked really crisp, really clean. It's his first game back since January 1st after tearing his ACL. So it's a really encouraging sign to see him run the ball really well, and he didn't show any ill effects from the injury. So hopefully this is the Mendenhall we'll be seeing the rest of the way. And hopefully it's the Mendenhall that we grew accustomed to seeing 2 years ago, where he hardly fumbled the ball at all, and of course had over 1,000 yards that year. So, because if this running game starts to pick it up, it'll help Ben. It'll make Ben feel a lot more comfortable, and that'll open up more passing plays as well. Because teams now are going to be saying, okay, that they can run the ball again with Mendenhall back. On the defensive side, I panicked early on when I watched the game because Troy Polamalu had to leave the game. Did not return. His calf was bandaged on the side. I was really freaking out at that point, and then when Taylor goes down, it's like, oh no, they're losing their top 2 players in their secondary. But Taylor ends up coming back 2 plays after, and it's solid back there. Lamar Woodley had to leave the game. He did not return. That is going to be a problem because for the first time, they had Harrison and Woodley both in there. That hasn't happened this year. And it looked well for a fourth of the quarter. Harrison, though, definitely looked sharp. He said coming in that he'd probably have to be spelled for Chris Carter, but he was out there for all 56 snaps that the Eagles had. So that's a good sign because Harrison said he felt fine. He didn't feel like he needed to come out. So definitely a good sign for him. Didn't have any sacks, but he pressured Vic a lot, hurried him. He was definitely causing some havoc that made Vic fluster and gave up some turnovers. The defensive line, I thought, did a really nice job. Steve McClendon had a forced fumble and a sack. Ziggy Hood had a sack. They definitely looked a lot better than they had in the first 3 games because it seemed like McCoy wasn't really getting a lot of yards. He wasn't getting a lot of push. Not until at least the end of the game. McCoy only had 16 carries for 53 yards, so that's quite an accomplishment because McCoy is definitely one of the top 5 running backs in this league. And also, probably one of the best players of the game, MVP of the game on defense, Lawrence Timmons. 8 tackles, 1 assist, almost had a sack. He was just all over the place. So I credit him for being the most disruptive on the Steelers' D. And you have to consider that with Woodley and Polamalu being out, the Eagles, they could have took advantage of this game, but they didn't. Michael Vick fumbled it 3 times, 4 times really, but he was called down. The third time one of the fumbles that he had, the Eagles center recovered it, but one was costly as it was right down at the goal line. Ryan Clark caused the fumble. Larry Foote recovered it in the end zone for a touchback. And then the other one was due to Steve McClendon, and Larry Foote also jumped on that again. So those turnovers proved costly because the Steelers ended up turning at least one of the turnovers into points. Now, the Steelers went up 10-0. It was 10-0 at halftime. I had a feeling, it's like, okay, they had a halftime lead over the Denver, they had a halftime lead over Oakland, and they ended up blowing them. Well, there were multiple times when the Steelers could have capitalized on getting the ball in the red zone and getting a touchdown, but they just couldn't do it. Ben had a 7-yard pass to Cawtrey that would have scored very easily, but Cawtrey trips over his own feet. They only settled for a field goal. That made it 13-7, and the Steelers defense let the Eagles go down a 75-yard drive, span of 8 minutes, and they ended up getting a touchdown to go up 14-13. So once again, when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, this defense is not doing good. you just had to figure, okay, maybe they're actually going to come through on offense. Ben's going to have a chance. Let's see what he can do. And they converted on some key third down plays. A nice 20-yard grab by Antonio Brown. A nice 8-yard grab by Emmanuel Sanders that moved the chains. And the Steelers ate up that last 6 minutes and 33 seconds of regulation. And they got in position, 34-yard field goal straight away, and Sweezum nailed it. So that's what you have to do if you want to be a playoff team in this league. And Ben has been there. He's done it before. 25 career fourth-quarter comebacks in the regular season, and he finally did it there. And I had my doubts. I didn't think they were going to come through. I just thought, oh, this is the way this year's going so far. I just don't think they're going to come through, and they ended up coming through. So the Steelers are now 2-2, and they have a short week. Thursday, they have at Tennessee, and this is a game they need to win. Baltimore's 4-1. Cincinnati, they fortunately lost at home to Miami. They're 3-2, so the Steelers win this game. They'll be tied with Cincinnati, just a game back of Baltimore. Steelers are the only team that have not played a divisional game yet, so they have the luxury of not playing them till the later half of the year. But the key in this Tennessee game, who by the way came off a 30-7 drubbing at the hands of Minnesota, they don't look good whatsoever. Chris Johnson, not where he is supposed to be in his career. He just can't find it. A consistent running game. Jake Locker is still questionable. Hasselbeck probably will go since it's a short week. They were without Kenny Britt Sunday. He will be questionable as well for the Thursday game. It's a good chance for the Steelers to finally get their first road win because lost at Denver, lost in Oakland. They're facing a bad team. I mean, let's face it, Tennessee is a bad team. The Steelers should win this game. Hopefully they'll get the consistent play from the offense. Hopefully the defense will step it up again. The one problem that I have for the Steelers, though, going into this game, Polamalu's not going to play. There's no way he's playing, especially on a short week. Hopefully he's not out for the long run, because if he is missing, I would say at least 4 to 6 weeks, this defense is in trouble, because Ryan Mundy, who has filled in he's filled in and been an exceptional player when he's had to step in there for a week or two. But if he has to be in there consistently, I just don't see it, because he's nowhere near as good as Polamalu is. And obviously you'll suffer with Troy not being in there. Obviously, in I2, Woodley will not be playing. With the short week, I don't think he'll play. I have a feeling he'll be back for the Cincinnati game, depending on how serious the injury is, but I just don't see him playing in this short week. So you're going to have Jason Worlds probably starting on the left side with Harrison on the right. So, but besides that, I think the offense should do well. And, I mean, Tennessee's defense, maybe at best they can be a top 20 defense, but I just don't see them posing a lot of challenges. Just the defensive line will just have to hold Chris Johnson, because, you know, he'll have that breakout game because he's a good running back. But I just think the Steelers are going to win this game. And my prediction is that they win the game by a score of 31-6. So we'll be talking about that game, of course, in our next show, since it is on a Thursday night. Now I would like to get into the Pitt-Syracuse game that took place last Friday on national TV, ESPN. And Pitt was coming off a 2-game winning streak. Syracuse was 1-3. This was another game that Pitt could have won. The long history that I've been watching Pitt, games with Cincinnati, this is third year starting. Another game they could have won. Should have won. Syracuse opens up 70-yard scoring drive. They looked like they were going to dominate this game. They go up 7-0, and then 2 series later, Cincinnati gets hit, or Drew Carswell gets hit, loses the ball, fumble. The Syracuse defender takes it in. They're up 14-0. I'm thinking, oh no, this is going to be another blowout on the road for the Panthers. But the Panthers get it back, and they actually start to move the ball really well on the defense. And it's a 14-13 game in the fourth quarter. And I'm thinking to myself, this team has a chance to win. Multiple mistakes, multiple penalties cost them this game. With 5 minutes to go, a little over 5 minutes, they had it at the Syracuse 14-yard line. My mistake, Syracuse 17-yard line. And a 34-yard field goal. And of course, Kevin Harper has not been sharp at kicking field goals lately, but makeable field goal. You just have to make no mistakes. What does Sunseri do? First play, he was about to get sacked, probably for a loss of 10. He ends up throwing it away, but he's not outside of the pocket, so they call intentional grounding. And then another sack puts them back even more, and then another sack. So right there, they're out of field goal range. They have to punt it away, and Syracuse ends up running the clock out. The defense played well. They have a top 25 defense in college football right now. And you say to yourself, then what's the problem? The problem is too many penalties, and the offense is just not coming through at the most opportune times. This game, though, which I was most disappointed in, was the running game for the Panthers. Ray Graham had 24 carries for 64 yards. That is less than 3 yards per carry. And Shell, who was injured, did not carry as much, and Isaac Bennett didn't do a whole lot either. That I was really disappointed because I said coming into the game, they have the best running back tandem in the Big East, and they failed to get anything going on the ground. Sunseri, on the other hand, he had a pretty efficient game once again. 25-33 for 319 yards, no interceptions, no touchdowns. He's still making these mistakes that a three-year starting quarterback just should not make. And I know you can say, oh, he's had a bunch of different coaches, a bunch of different systems. It just shouldn't matter. He shouldn't be making those types of mistakes. The intentional grounding was just a horrible, horrible mistake. One of the bright spots, though, in this game was Devin Street. 10 receptions for 130 yards. That's the go-to connection for this Pitt team to have any type of success the rest of this year. Sunseri to Street, I think, is their best 1-2 combination. I know some will say Mike Shanahan, but I think Street, he's turned out to be a pretty good pass catcher for this Pitt team. And obviously, they're going to need him to be a big part if he wants to help this team reach a bowl game. Now, I know coming into the Syracuse game, I said I think Pitt has a really good chance of winning the conference. They obviously don't feel that way now. They're 0-2. They pretty much have to run the table and then hope for a miracle because two of the undefeated teams in the conference, I'm my mistake, three of them, Cincinnati, who they already lost to, who looks pretty darn good, and then Louisville and Rutgers, who are ranked in the top 20. It'll be hard for all three of them to at least lose 2 games. Then Cincinnati would have to lose 3 because they hold a tiebreaker over Pitt. But next Saturday, it's the homecoming game, 11 a.m. start time, which I was a little disappointed to see it starting that early. Pitt's home. They're hosting Louisville. And they also will be hosting Rutgers later this year at home too. So you're getting the top teams, the top 2 teams in your conference. You're hosting them at Heinz Field. So you would think that they would pull out at least a couple, maybe a win or 2, because I believe this Pitt team is a better team at home than they are away. I think that's already been proven. Of course, the Youngstown State game, that was, I think, a minor hiccup. I just see them pulling off the upset against Louisville because it'll be an early game. Homecoming, I just think the Pitt offense is going to find a way to get it done. Now, when they get on the road, I don't know. So I could see the team being 6-6, maybe 7-5. I still think they're good enough to get to a bowl game, but I don't see a consistent play from this team on the road and at home. I don't see that. But hopefully, with the players coming in, the more recruits Chris will get, this team will be better on next year and in the coming years. Well, the Major League Baseball playoffs have begun, so that means the Pirates have finished their season. I remember saying on last week's show that, okay, maybe they could sweep the Braves, at least take 2 or 3, build kind of some, at least momentum, finish the season off on a high note. And they did. They took 2 or 3 from the Braves, but they lost the final game of the year, and they got shut out 4-0. So that was kind of disappointing. The bad thing was that this was the 12th time this year that the Pirates were shut out, and in those shutouts had 4 hits or less. That led the major leagues. So much stuff, I think, needs to be done with this team. But it's not going to happen because Huntington will not spend the money nutting. I don't think it's going to happen unless he fires Huntington and possibly Coonley. So if that doesn't happen, you most likely will see the same exact team, maybe with a few adjustments. I don't know if it's going to help the team. I don't see a lot of positions where they could improve greatly. I know Josh Hamilton's a free agent, and I read somewhere that you shouldn't rule the Pirates out on getting him, but if you pay him all the money, you bring him in as your left fielder, that means what? You move, or your right fielder, you move Marte over to right. You give up on Snyder, who you traded for, giving up on Presley and Tabata. I don't see that happening if Huntington is still here. But like I said, we'll probably within the next couple weeks, we'll talk about the Pirates, have a whole show devoted to them. That's pretty much all I'm going to touch up on them. I do want to bring up one point, though. The new format under the MLB playoffs, the division series, the lower seed, meaning, for example, Oakland against Detroit is one of the current NLDS matchups. Oakland finished with a better record. They're the number 2 seed. Detroit's the number 3. The first 2 games are in Detroit, and then the last 3 are in Oakland. And since it's a best of 5, Detroit, if they win both of those games, they're up 2 games to none. And that's putting pressure on Oakland. And you're saying, okay, Oakland has 3 games at home. Well, they should win them at home. But still, I think it is really unfair that you're giving the team who finished with the worst record, you're giving them the first 2 games at home. And that's happened. That has happened. Detroit has won the first 2 games. They are currently up 2 games to none. I think that has to be changed. I mean, I like what C-League has done with the format, adding the extra wild card, but to have the lower seed, to have the lower seed host the first 2 games, it just does not make sense to me. Now, I know you can go on the opposite side and say, okay, since you're the higher seed, you should be able to at least split the series and then have those final 3 games at home where you should win the series. In the case of the National League, the Cincinnati Reds went to San Francisco. They won games 1 and 2. So now they're going to have the final 3 at home. It'd be a miracle for San Francisco to win that series now. So I guess you could do it either way, but if it's for me, as a fan that I am, I just think the higher seed should get the first 2 games at home, and the lower seed should get 2 games, and then the 5th game should be back at the higher seed. Even though it'll probably cause travel issues, I still think that should be the way it's done. And the last thing I want to get into real quick, the NHL games, NHL preseason has been canceled. The season was supposed to start this Friday, or this Thursday. Not going to happen. The games have been canceled through October 24th. More players are signing to play overseas, and nothing is really looking good right now for the NHL to at least have a season. Most people are saying if they have a season, it's going to be January 1st because that's when the Winter Classic is. They miss out on that, they're losing a chunk of money. If they don't play that, then they're probably not going to have a season at all. So, I'm just really disappointed, but hopefully they can just get a deal done and play hockey at some point because I want to see the Penguins play. But I would like to encourage a lot of people on October 11th to grab your favorite NHL jersey, wear it if you go out to school, go out to work. Just wear it and say, okay, I want hockey, and just say, oh, this is when hockey would begin, so I'm just showing my support for this league, and hopefully they'll get it done, because I'll be wearing my Sidney Crosby jersey on Thursday, because, hey, it's when the NHL would have started. Penguins game would have been on the 12th, Friday. Hey, my support for hockey and my remembrance of when the season would have actually started. But that'll do it, though, for today's episode of the Sports Wrap. Next week, like I said, we'll be talking about the Steelers against the Titans, Pitt hosting Louisville, any more updates with the NHL lockout. Maybe get into a little Pitt Panther basketball talk, and then we'll see where we go from there. So signing off, this is Michael Kravetz, and you just listened to the Sports Wrap.